Evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Tonight is the May 9th, 2019 Town Board Work Session. Would everyone please rise for the pledge? Thank you. I don't have any announcements, Peter. I'll wait for the voting meeting. So our first item for discussion is our tax assessment. We have our tax assessor here, Kathy Martin. Thanks for joining us. Everybody has received their tax assessment this week, and there's been a lot of hubbub going on about why is it higher. Well, some people are higher than others, and some are lower. So I figured that would be a good idea to have you here to explain. Our comptroller, Mr. Posniak, will also be doing a presentation. And I just want to say that the town board is here to give you the proper information. There's a lot of misinformation that goes out, and everybody knows, because I say it all the time, on social media. That is not correct information. Call one of us to get the correct information. Please don't get your information from Facebook. All our phone numbers are public. If you need to reach any of us, call us. We will get you the correct information. I put out on our Facebook page this week a notice to call my office, 221-4303, anytime. I'm there all the time. Call me. I'm here to work for the people, to give you the correct information. So with that, Kathy, I think it's good if you start with give us an overview of the assessment process and what happens every year when you start to compile this data, and that you have to support all your data to the state, and what happens with that.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me in tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to let everybody know the correct information, because I've heard that there has been a lot of misinformation out there. And again, I also encourage anybody that has any questions to please reach out to my office. We are here 9 to 4, 5 days a week. Our phone number is 845-226-6353, and we're happy to answer any questions. You can stop in at any time or feel free to give us a call. So basically, the town of East Fishkill is an annually reassessing community, which means that we do a townwide reassessment every single year. In 2007 was the first year we went through a townwide reassessment. Prior to that, our level of assessment was 9.9%. So back then, houses, vacant land, businesses, everything was only assessed at a fraction of their true value. Being at 100%, we feel, is much more transparent, because there is no calculations you have to do to figure out what your house is really assessed at. We're at 100%. If your assessment's $500,000, that's what it is. And so back then in 2007, the tax rate was much higher. When we brought everybody up to 100%, the tax rate came down, and we were more reflective of the market values of that time. One of the main reasons for us doing the reassessment every year is because we want to maintain 100% of equalization rate from New York State. The state is the ones that certify our equalization rate. Now, what that means is all of the towns in the school districts, like the Wappinger School District, the Arlington School District, all the towns share the school districts. So each town has to pay an apportionment of the burden for the school district. So when we're not at 100%, or if we're at a different percentage of the other towns within that school district, we could be paying more than our fair share of school taxes, and we don't want that. We don't want to pay any more than we have to. So it's really important for us to maintain that 100% equalization for those reasons, for school tax reasons, but also for state aid, because a lot of the state aid that the municipalities and the school districts receive are contingent upon the level of assessment. So each year we go through all the sales in the town. all the deeds that get filed in Dutchess County, my office gets copies of them, all the transactions, and we analyze the sales. Now, for a number of years, our assessments were just stable. You know, the reval took place in 2007, and the sales that were used at that time were from the height of the market, around 2005, 2006, but everybody knows shortly thereafter, the market started to decline. So we lowered the assessments for several years after the reval, and then for a number of years, we just were stable. And just in the last 2 years, we've started to really see the market start to recover. We talk to a lot of real estate agents, a lot of attorneys, and everybody's telling us now that houses are flying off the market. There's bidding wars, and you know that's a good, healthy real estate market, and that's what we want because everybody wants to build equity in their home. So we take all the sales that transpire in the town of East Fishkill, we take a look at them, and we figure out, is the market going up, is it going down, is it going up in a different neighborhood? Like different neighborhoods might move at different rates for different reasons. So we analyze all that information, and then we do a statistical analysis of all the properties in the town, and we figure out where we should be to maintain that 100% equalization rate. So this year, I had thought we would be at about a 5% increase. So I submitted that to the state. The state ran a couple of tests, and then they came back to me and said that, you know, 5% wasn't quite enough. So we ended up with 6%. So we've seen a 6% increase pretty much straight across the board on the residential properties only. We didn't look at the vacant land. We looked at the vacant land, but we didn't trend the vacant land or the commercial businesses. It was just strictly the growth that we saw in the town was on the residential properties. So we applied a 6% increase across the board, but there were some neighborhoods that moved up a little bit higher, and there were some people that came down a little bit as well.
So how does that work? So I have my tax assessment here. I went up 13%. And I know some of my neighbors or council persons here didn't go up as much, and some went up even more.
Right.
So why some more than 6% and why some lower?
Okay, because some people maybe did some work on their house, maybe you put on a big deck or you finish your basement. That would warrant, any kind of new construction would warrant an additional increase on top of the 6%. But then, as I said, we stratify all the sales and all the assessments in the whole town, and then we look at everything that's too low and everything that's too high. So if somebody's house comes out as an outlier, meaning it was already too low, maybe they came up 13%.
Higher than the, okay,
Right.
gotcha. Understood. So back to where you said that the state certifies your tax roll.
Yes.
And this year, they said that your tax roll, the first initial submittal that you did wasn't high enough. So who do you discuss that with? Who's the person that reviews this, and what do they do when they do review that?
Well, it's the Office of Real Property Services, but they come under New York State Tax and Finance. And they work very closely with us, the assessment community, and they help us run different tests on the roll and different statistical analysis. We're allowed to be, there's a 5% give either way. So we could be at 95% or 105%, but we have to fall within that criteria to get the 100% equalization rate.
Okay.
So when they first took a first pass at my roll, the sales were showing that we weren't quite gonna make it. So we had to discuss a few different things. I did some more work. We looked at different outliers, different neighborhoods, did some work on that, cleaned up some of the sales, and then we got it to pass at 6%. So.
Okay.
And all the other neighboring towns have gone up as well. So it's a good story in Dutchess County right now. It's a good time to be a homeowner in Dutchess County because the market values are increasing.
So usually you receive a letter because some people have called and asked me, well, I never received a letter before. Usually they won't receive a letter if they didn't have a change in assessment.
Right.
So if they have a up or a down assessment change, that's when they get a letter.
This year, we sent out only increase notices.
Okay.
Everybody can either come into the town hall, there's a copy of the assessment roll in the assessor's office. There's also a copy in the town clerk's office that's free for the public to look at anytime they want. Also, you can go on Dutchess County's parcel access. You can look up everybody's assessment in the whole county, sales prices, information, whatever you want to find out.
So our total assessment roll, we have 11,784,000 parcels, which equals $4.3 billion assessment roughly.
Yes.
Okay, so, I'll get into the tax ramifications with the comptroller, but does the town board have questions for our assessor? Before we go into, Mark's presentation?
So, I was looking at a little bit on my own to find different mechanisms that you use to do the equalizations as far as the state is concerned. And one paragraph that says over here, each municipality determined its own level of assessment. This is in contrast to most states that require one level of assessment statewide. Hundreds of taxing jurisdictions, including most schools, districts, and counties, do not share the same taxing boundaries as the city and towns that are responsible for assessing properties. And it does talk a little bit about the school taxes among multiple municipalities. So I know that I asked this question before, but is the reason why the state is kind of, I say, imposing or overlooking your assessment is because they want to make sure that we pay our fair share of school taxes. Is that something to Mark, maybe you could help us answer this question.
Okay.
But
Or the attorney?
does that sound like a fair assessment, or is that far-fetched?
Any municipality, like I declare our level of assessment at 100%. I fill out a form and I say that I'm at 100%. Then the state measures that to see if I fall within their criteria, to see if we make that 100%. We could not be at 100% if we wanted, we could be at any percent we wanted to be.
Right.
If we wanted to be 80%, we'd be 80%. But the reason it's so important here is so there's no shifts between the towns with, as it relates to school tax apportionment.
All the towns that make up
But
the school
I
district.
think to the councilman's question, the reason the state oversees it is because they want every town to follow the same system, so that, like even the county tax, why, if East Fishkill just arbitrarily decided to reduce their assessments below a certain level, East Fishkill would pay less of the county tax, and that would be unconstitutionally unfair to all the other residents of Dutchess County. Same thing with Wappingers, we know it's 6 towns. So if each town was on their own, they could play
So-
whatever game they wanted to with the assessment.
Right, so I think
Right.
you answered my question pretty well. So there is, at the end of the day, the state interest in, to make sure that our evaluations is done correctly and accurate, is because they want to make sure that we pay our fair share of school taxes.
That's right.
And all of this falls within those different ratios that were provided to you?
Yes, yeah.
Could you go over those just quickly, the different types of ratios for the public? I know the sales ratio is the one that we fell short of, correct?
Right,
That was that was in the email that you received when it was rejected.
yeah, the sales ratio. And then they test for, let's see, SDPAV is the sales price dependent assessed valuation after a change in level. The CAMA ratio is for computer-generated mass appraisals. So basically what I do over the course of the winter, like when we're bringing in all the exemption forms and everything from the public, is I'm building, and with the help of the county and the state, a mass appraisal system for each year that we do a computer-generated analysis. So we run cost tables that we have to adjust in every year. We use cost tables, we use sales, and on the commercial properties, we do the income approach too. So we put all that into the computer so that we can generate our values, and then that's what the state is testing.
How those properties that are taken off the tax map affect the evaluation of properties when you use a metric to evaluate the assessment
Well,
for the
we
municipality?
value them all, so even though they may be exempt, they may be nonprofit or exempt properties, they still do get valued, and they do get changes in assessments as well. So we leave them in the mix, because we value them all, because there may be a day where if it's, you know, a non-for-profit use, if the non-for-profit use changes and it becomes for-profit, we want to have a good, solid value on there, an accurate value at that time. So but with this trend this year, we've focused primarily on the residential properties. The nonprofits are not so much in that classification generally, like, you know, usually we have parks and, you know, there would be like hospitals, churches, like in that class of properties.
I don't want to get ahead of your presentation, but after a resident watches the video, they now understand a little bit more of how this works, and they still don't agree with their assessment. What can they do about it?
They can come into the office and we can sit down together and have a discussion, look at any documentation. I would highly recommend anybody that comes either to see me or the grievance board especially, bring documentation with you. If you know of sales in your neighborhood that sold for lower, you know, anything that would help your case. I mean, people bring pictures, pictures of their property, pictures of their homes, or anything that would speak to their case. You know, so that's basically what we do, is I would sit down with a person, review everything. Either we can come to an agreement, like I could, you know, see their point and say, hey, maybe you're right, you know, and say maybe it should come down a little bit. We can come to an agreement at that point in time. If we're not in agreement, the next step would be to go to grievance day, and that's first come, first serve. The hours are 2 to 4, 6 to 8. On the fourth Tuesday in May. All the hours, I believe, are on that letter that everybody got. And at that point, you just sign in, and the grievance board is made up of residents from the town who are volunteers. Most of them have a background in real estate, and they are given training by the county about the laws, about real property tax law. So then just come and talk to the grievance board. They're your neighbors too. They're paying taxes.
And Kathy, could you dispel a false image? If you go to the grievance board, they can't raise your assessment.
That's true. They cannot raise your
A
assessment.
lot of people have always said, oh, I don't want to
Right.
go there because then they'll raise me
I
up.
think years
but-
ago,
Right.
they were allowed to, but
Yes.
that law's been changed. They can only lower.
And also to dispel something else, which now our comptroller will give us a presentation, everybody says that their assessment goes up, that the taxes are going to go up as well.
Right.
That's not true.
No.
The only way, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, that's right. You're absolutely right. That is not true. Everyone went up the 6%. So if everybody went up the same amount, then the tax rate comes down. So, and I think a lot of people, when they realize it's the whole town that was reassessed, not just them, they feel better about it because, you know, it's a good market. People are happy that they can sell their homes for more, or that they're building equity, so.
Right, Mark, do you want to
Sure.
give our presentation so we could explain how the assessment works with the taxes? So the people at home and the people here could see what is the truth about your assessment versus your taxes.
Yeah, I would agree with your last point about a misconception that an increase in assessed value has a direct correlation to an increase in your property taxes. I mean, there is some relationship, but not nearly that direct. So what I've done here is created a few scenarios that are meant to isolate the issues that we're talking about. So it's an oversimplified town. In the first case, this town has 10,000 houses. Every single one of them is valued the same at $350,000, so we have a total town assessment of $3.5 billion. The town board later in the year passes a budget with a levy of $10 million. So every house pays $1,000. And the tax rate that's calculated from that is 2.8571 per $1,000 of assessed value. In the next year, the assessor follows market trends and raises the houses all the same, 10%. Later in the year, the board decides not to change the townwide tax levy, so they're still going to collect $10 million. What that results in is the same $1,000 raised in property taxes per house, right? So we're collecting the same total levy with the same number of houses. They all went up 10%, but none of them pays a penny more.
So let's, Mark, I'm going to interrupt you right there. Let's be realistic.
That's the next slide.
Yeah.
Let-
Just allow me to say one
Okay,
comment, and then
this
we'll
is-
move on.
Well, it's, again, the math here is the same math that's going to apply in a far more complicated situation. I'm just trying to isolate the variables so you can see the relationships. But let me go to the next slide, and it might, and then even the third slide will show a little bit more complexity, okay? Okay, in this next scenario, the town, 2019 is exactly the same. We have 10,000 houses, each worth exactly the same amount. The only thing that's changed here is that the board decided to raise the levy by 2% during the year. Okay, so in this case, we have a 10% increase in assessed value, a 2% increase in the levy. All of the homes are paying 2% more, $20 more per year. So again, in this case, the assessment has no impact on what they pay in taxes because everyone's assessment went up by the same amount. What's driving their tax bill in this case is the total levy. In New York State, towns are limited to a 2% growth on their levy. It can be exceeded. This is the 2% tax cap by a vote and a local law. We have never exceeded the 2% tax cap. There is, and this is where there's some additional misinformation, there is an allowance for us to exceed the 2% without breaking the cap based on increase in assessments.
New assessments.
Thank you.
New assessments.
But it's only for new construction. So new houses, new decks, in addition to the house. So in concept, if we had 1% growth in new construction, so in this scenario where we have 10,000 homes, let's say we built 100 more homes exactly like the others, right? That would allow us to increase our levy by the 2% plus an additional 1%, which would be $102,000. That $102,000 extra is being paid by those new homes. Those 100 new homes are paying that $102,000 extra dollars. So the 2% is still the cap on what the existing homeowners are paying. All right, now to add a little bit more complexity, in this third scenario, we're now going to break our town up into 3 different neighborhoods. They're all going to start the same. We're going to have 3,000 houses of the 10 in neighborhood A, 4,000 in neighborhood B, and another 3,000 in neighborhood C. So again, the 2019 numbers are all the same as they were from scenario 1 and 2. But this time, we're going to increase the neighborhoods by different amounts. In neighborhood A, we're going to increase the houses by 5%, in B by 10%, and C by 15%. Our levy is going to go up to 2%, so we're going to go from 10 million to 10,200,000. Our total assessment in this scenario is the same as it was here, but it's just spread out differently amongst the houses. So this is still an average of a 10% growth, but some houses are 5, some are 10, some are 15. So how does this affect what they actually pay? In this scenario, the homes in neighborhood A, living in a town where the levy went up by 2% and their assessments went up by 5%, actually see a decrease in property taxes. The homes in where there was the average increase in assessed value show that same increase as we saw before. And those with the greater increase in assessment show a higher increase in their property taxes. So this is where the assessment can affect what you pay in property taxes. It's when your assessment grows at a different rate than your neighbors. You can take this and apply this to the county, and the different neighborhoods could be different neighborhoods all throughout the county or school districts or whatever, but in this case, we're looking at the town. That's how the increase in assessment can affect what you pay as an individual homeowner. Now, the 5, 10, and 15 is a bit on the extreme side, so I just brought it to a little bit more of a realistic range of numbers. And in this case, we have the neighborhoods going up by 9, 10, and 11% respectively. And you see their property taxes. It's obviously different from each other, but not all that dramatic. So the homes that went up 9% are paying 1.1% more in property taxes. The homes that went up 10% are paying 2% more in property taxes. And the homes that went up 11% are paying 2.9%. So that's just an effort to explain the relationship between assessed values and what you're actually going to pay in property taxes. Manny, did you?
So, to my point, is that a reassessment, an increase in assessment value, there is a correlation. And you have just pointed out now that depending on what the town board determines that year that the budget is going to go up, that new assessment will pay that portion of that percentage, correct? So if a house in East Fishkill was worth $900,000, now it's $1 million. That 1.7% increase, it's not reflective on the 100,000, but it's now going to be reflective on the $1 million.
No.
Well,
No, that's not true. Again, let's say all houses went up by that same amount. They're all going to pay 1.7% based on the actual property tax bill. The percent increase that we generally talk about in this town is on the levy, which correlates to what you actually see on your property tax, not on the assessed value. So when we say we're raising property taxes in East Fishkill by 1.75%, that's based on the 10 million increasing by 1.75%, not the tax rate increasing by 1.75%. And again, in this case, you can see the tax rate is generally going down. And what you're saying would be true if we were raising the tax rate by 2%, then your assessment would go up by more than the 2%.
So in the first scenario, you gave us an example where you said everybody's on the same level and everybody pays the same amount. Then the following year, you said the town board raised the taxes, but the assessed value stood the same, so nothing changed.
No, the assessed
What-
value didn't stay the same. None of the scenarios did the assessed value stay the same.
In the second scenario,
No,
the 10% increase.
it's just that they all increased by 10%,
the assessed value.
assessed value.
And
Their
So in the
taxes only
second
went-
year, when the town board raises, you said that they did go up across the board because of the increase in the tax levy, correct?
Yeah, so again, using this scenario, the assessments went up by 10%, the levy went up by 2%, which was the cap, and what people are actually paying in their homes is going up by 2%, not 12, or not 10, not There's no cumulative factor there.
Correct, but there is that $20 increase.
Yeah, that's because we increased the levy by 2%, so you're paying 2% more. It has nothing to do with your assessed value.
And if you didn't change the assessment and you raised the levy by 2%,
You'd still pay 2% more.
$20.
Right. So the only role the assessment plays is how the pie is divvied up. The assessment doesn't, an increased assessment doesn't increase the pie. An increased assessment with varying degrees of increase, you have 5%, you have 6%, you have 7%. It's just changing slightly how each of you pay. But the total I collect from you guys is still going to be the same. Whether it was 0 across the board, whether it was 5 across the board, or whether it was 4, 5, and 6.
When our tax value properties assessments all went down for the last 5 years, we still paid the same amount.
That's right. You didn't get a break when your assessment went down,
My
and you're
property
not
value
getting
went down for
necessarily
6 years in a row.
penalized. As was kind of brought up, there is again, there is a function here of how your assessment will affect your county tax and your school tax. We don't know exactly what all the other towns have done, but we do know that they're also, all the ones that we've had contact with are also increasing their assessments at, within the same ballpark. So that it shouldn't have a significant impact on the county and school taxes. But if ours were going up significantly here in East Fishkill and nothing was going up in the rest of the county, you would end up paying more, because you're paying a bigger portion of that county pie, and you're going to pay a bigger portion of that Wappinger Central School pie.
And just one last comment, I think that everybody in the community, because when we look at the large pie and we see that the percentage of taxes that the town collects out of the 100% pie, it's probably
10.
less than 10%.
It's about 10.
Right. So the big burden to everybody in this community is the school taxes.
Correct.
And you just made a point that we do not know how the assessments are going to play a role in those school taxes. I think that's what everybody is kind of, when they receive that letter, they don't even open it because, so what am I up to next as far as my school taxes is concerned?
Right.
So,
Except, however, as you said before, with the state overseeing all of the communities within the Wappinger School District, if each community is held to the same standard by the state, which they are, then this scenario could be very readily applied to the school district assessment role, so that the same should be true. The only increase would be directly affected by the levy increase. But if all the assessments are trended up to keep them at 100% across the whole district, it should work the same as it will for the town.
Yeah, I also think it's important to note that there's a significant amount of new construction, like new ratables that were added to the assessment roll. So that will help to, offset any increases.
Right, and that's why we try to increase the pie by having new construction, new businesses come here, open doors, build factories, because we want that to offset the homeowners' portion of their taxes. So it's a very confusing, it is very confusing, and we deal with this daily, and it's still confusing to me. So I understand when people are frustrated and they don't understand. That's why it's important to call, and we'll give you whatever clarification we can. And to make things a little more confusing, right now, we're in the process of dealing with an assessment with Global Foundries. And Global Foundries has indicated that they also think that their assessment is unfair. And we're in the process of reviewing that. I have contacted our partners with Dutchess County, the county executive, Mark Molinaro, and the Wappinger Central School District Superintendent, Jose Carrion. We've had many meetings about this. We have hired an independent valuation expert to review the Global Foundry site and to review their assessments, their appraisals. They had appraisals done, and we hired an independent firm to take a look at those, and also to do an investigation on comparable sites throughout the country to make sure that our taxpayers are going to be protected, that Global Foundries is paying their correct share of the taxes. Right now, do you want to expand upon that, Kathy or Tom?
Sure, I mean, basically, as the supervisor indicated, they have indicated their need to have this dialogue. If we cannot resolve it by agreement, then they would have the right to file a tax certiorari against the town.
And what exactly is that process?
What that is that, as Kathy said, if you go to the Board of Review in May, and you're dissatisfied with their decision, you have the right to file with the Supreme Court in Poughkeepsie. And then everybody gets appraisals done, and if it can't be resolved, then the judge hears the case and makes a decision and decides what the assessed value of the property is. Now, in the case of a large property, if you get into that scenario, they keep paying their property tax as, based on the assessment as fixed. The case in court may take 2 to 3 years. If they are successful in a reduction, then they're also entitled to a refund of the taxes that they paid over and above what the assessment is ultimately set at. So the communities, the town, the county, the school district, the fire district, the library district would have to refund money to them together with interest. So that's why it's worth a major effort to try to come to an agreement in advance of them paying the tax so that you don't get the cost of the major appraisals, the litigation, and the potential for the refund, because obviously that's very difficult for any board to factor in that they may lose X dollars from a prior year and have to repay it. So we are working very hard to try to resolve that, to keep our tax base stable, and yet get ourselves away from extensive litigation.
Yeah, it's that's also a very difficult situation to explain with the tax implications.
And could I just add one
Yes.
thing? I think the most confusing thing, we know Global Foundries is a major site, major buildings, and we hear over the years, IBM invested $1 billion, that Global Foundries invested. But in a facility like that, the major value is in the equipment that's in the building. That's where the high-end value is. And the way New York state law is, that equipment is not accessible because it can be moved out of the building. So the only thing of value that can be assessed are the buildings themselves. And as we know, the buildings here are aging over the years. There have been improvements, have not been. Some of the property's been sold off to others for future development. So all of those issues play a factor here. It's not, and everything in this area is very confusing, but most people think, my God, they spend $1 billion, they're not paying enough. Well, 3/4 of that billion went for equipment that either isn't there anymore or can be removed at a moment's notice. So that's another factor we should all remember.
Yeah. Any comments, questions?
I think one more statement that we should dispel that I've been seeing online is the fact that the town board has no control over your assessment and that number that goes up each year. So that is determined between the state and the assessor.
Right, in the town of East Fishkill, we have a sole assessor.
Right.
Who's appointed by the town board for a 6-year term, so that he or she cannot be influenced by the board during that term. Has to be state certified, not certified, but state certified. Take annual training, and once appointed, then has sole authority over the assessment role of the town, and the town board cannot force any changes to that role. The only role the town board plays is if there is a tax certiorari and a resolution is reached because it could involve a refund, then the town board must approve that. But other than that, the town board has no direct authority or control over the assessments.
Any other board members, comments, questions,
I
concerns?
mean, as I mentioned before, I don't know if you're available to come to our next board meeting. I think it's probably important if there is anybody in the community besides coming to your office that night, if they have any questions. I don't know how your schedule is, but if you're available,
Okay.
we'll be more than
Yeah, and also I put it out on our town webpage, the assessor's number, my number, if you have questions. You know, there's been a lot of discussion lately, but I haven't really seen a lot of people come to town hall.
Right.
I mean, asked the board today about how many people have called them and asked them about this. And how many people called you about this? One person? Manny, how many called you?
I got about 15, and maybe 3 or 4 people come over and see me personally, but
Okay.
that's about it.
Councilman?
2.
2 people?
0.
0, and me about 8 people. Please call us. That's why we're here. We want to help you. We want to explain to you what this means. And then come see the assessor. Talk to her about your assessment. Why is it? How does it affect you? That's our job. That's why we're here. So, like I said, my number's 221-4303. That's my office number. Please call me, email me. You email me about so many things, about, you know, cracks in the roads and, you know, their neighbors' fences falling down. Call me about this. This is important. And please don't go on social media to get your information. That's not the place to get it. We're here to give you the correct information. So, anything else, board members? Peter?
Should we all line up with our letters tonight?
Yes, we all have our letters here
The
tonight, so.
the market value you've got on these houses. Looking at them, I know none of us would sell our house for what that market value is. Is that pretty much true across the board in the other towns?
Meaning you wouldn't sell it because what's on
What's
your,
on that number we know is nowhere near what our house is actually worth,
it's worth, that means your house is worth more or less?
more.
Okay.
And I would say that's probably pretty much true with everybody's that you're looking at. So, in Wappinger.
She's the assessor, you're not gonna tell her that,
She
Peter.
knows that. Just saying. What they've dropped over the last 10 years. And what realistically, because when you get a new house value, it's from what it's sold for today.
Right. Our valuation period is always a little bit back in time. So our valuation period for this project was July 1st of 2018. So the market has continued to increase.
Right.
I tend to take a conservative approach, but
But all the towns do.
yeah, I mean,
all
I
on the same
think
page.
that we're all pretty much, we communicate with each other, and we have a county-wide association where we meet and we all work together, so,
But they're pretty much all on the same page.
yeah,
is what I'm saying.
absolutely.
Could you re-review the deputy supervisors? So I think he's complaining it's too low.
Yeah, he wants to sell it for more money, 100,000
I
more.
would sell it
Peter.
for more money. I wouldn't sell it for that.
But again, I agree with the town supervisor and everyone, all the councilmen, that please call us. Please, if you have any questions, concerns, any issues at all, please call, email, stop in. We're happy to address anything we can to help you.
Okay, anybody else? No. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Kathy.
Presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number 2, we're gonna have Mr. Artis come up and give us a discussion about our MS4. It's that time of year again.
That's what I was gonna say.
I stole your line, Mr. Artis. How are you tonight?
Very good, thank you, and thank you for having me here this evening. Again, I requested to be on this evening's agenda to inform the board that the 2018-2019 Stormwater Management Program annual report is complete, and that's from the reporting period March 10th, 2018 through March 9th of 2019. There's really, we're still operating on the 2015 permit. There's really nothing of significance to report during this past reporting period. What we are waiting on is a new MS4 permit. In late 2016, the DEC issued a draft MS4 permit to be effective in 2017. When they
Has
put
it
it-
happened?
Well, what happened, when they put it out for public comment, they received such a massive volume of comments, they pulled the permit back. And basically, it went dead. It was kind of dead in the water for maybe close to a year. Then they started working on it again. I understand it's getting closer to being completed. Now, whether the public will have another opportunity to provide comment, that I don't know.
Now, could you back up a little for
Sure.
the people who don't understand what MS4 is and why do we need to be certified? Can you give it a little explanation on that, please?
Okay, this originates with the EPA from the Clean Water Act. In 2003, the EPA issued the Phase 2 stormwater regulations. That was passed down to, at that time, it was only 40 states that had regulatory authority. It's closer to 50 now. In New York State, the New York State DEC is the regulatory authority for Phase 2 stormwater regulations. They designated, at that point in time, about 450 or so municipalities across New York State as MS4. That was based on the census. If you have 1,000 residents within a square mile, that kicked you in, basically. And when it initially came out, you had what they called the urbanized areas, and there was a lot of confusion. Is the ordinance only valid for the urbanized area and not in this part of town? And that's a whole nother discussion, but most people went with a town-wide ordinance. So in 2003, the town of East Fishkill and in Dutchess County, 14 other municipalities, in addition to the DOT and the DPW, they're called non-traditional MS4s, they had to submit a notice of intent to the New York State DEC to obtain permit coverage. At that point in time, there was a 5-year implementation period. We were all to be in compliance by 2008. The big ticket items in that 5-year implementation period were outfall mapping and the adoption of ordinances, and really just to get your whole program in sync, so to speak, with training and things like highway department facilities. They issued another permit in 2008. Well, actually, I'll back up a little. In 2008, they also, DEC then threw a lot more on the town's shoulders, on the MS4's shoulders. We were then became responsible for review and approval of all stormwater pollution prevention plans that either went into the front of the planning board or building departments or whatever. We were also required to conduct our own inspections from a town standpoint. So they threw a lot more on our shoulders in 2008. That's also when they started conducting audits and evaluations of MS4s. They issued a new permit in 2010, another one in 2012, and then another one in 2015. The 2015 was pretty much the same one from 2012. The draft 2017 that came out was pretty rough, to put it lightly.
Meaning more and more regulations.
More and more enhanced requirements, some just totally not even feasible.
Right.
It's
So
just-
the people understand that this is mandated
unfunded.
to us by New York State, and we have to fund it. There is no funds that New York State gives us for this. This is an unfunded mandate where they say you have to do it, and you have to pay for it.
Correct, correct. It's an unfunded mandate. Right. There are some grants, they're not easy to obtain, but there are some grants out there to assist on it. And again, in that 2003 to 2008 period, we did get some grants through the MS4 Coordination Committee for the outfall mapping, and we had a 50/50 grant on the ordinances as well. So I suspect if that 2017 permit comes out and there are some of these enhanced requirements that we saw in that draft that came out a couple years ago, that the committee would be going for some grants to help out the MS4s in Dutchess County.
Sounds like fun. So we are in compliance.
We're in compliance with the current permit, yes, yes.
Okay, excellent. Any comments from the board, questions?
As long as we're in compliance, that's what we care about, right?
Wow, absolutely. We have to go through this, and Mr. Artis is very detail-oriented, and I appreciate all the work, and any highlights you want to mention?
Again, this year, I remember last year I came in front of you with that septic grant.
Right,
You know,
yes.
that was, something of significance.
And that's finally being implemented by Dutchess County Department of
Oh,
Health.
okay, very good.
Finally, so that includes Hillside Lake and Sylvan
Sylvan
Lake.
Lake, right.
And to date, I don't know if anybody has signed up for it, but if, I've been mentioning this at multiple meetings, there is a 50/50 match with Dutchess County Department of Health is implementing this grant that we got through New York State, and it's for anybody who's replacing their septics, and if you're located within a certain parameter on Sylvan Lake or Hillside Lake, all notices have gone out to you. If you live in those boundaries where you are qualified to apply for the grant. So please keep a notice of that. If you have questions about it, please call the town, call our building department. We have information for you.
And the committee, this year, the committee has been active in some new initiatives with the school districts, getting students involved. We had a billboard contest, and actually there's a billboard not far from here that went up, and that's thanks to the committee. We had a PSA contest, public service announcement contest, and we're continuing to do that, to work with the different school districts too, to just try to get them involved as well.
Great, that's great.
And then we also get credit for that too as well in our.
That counts. That's
Yeah,
what we want.
It's a win-win, so.
Right.
I know that the town is gonna be doing some work in Hillside Lake. As far as the remediation,
Right.
we're gonna be starting soon. And I know that our town engineer and professionals are gonna be doing the due diligence, but is there an involvement as far as your MS4 regarding that? Or you're just gonna kind of at the end?
Yeah, I would
Summarize.
just summarize what happened this past reporting period. And just as of note, when you bring that up, once a year, we have Natalie Brown from the DEC come to the committee, because we always have some new questions for her, because we do have some gray areas here and there. And I brought it to her attention that the town did adopt an ordinance there, and she thought that was really good, that septic pump out ordinance.
Yep.
Because we weren't required to do that, as we were in East of Hudson, but it certainly made sense, especially with that grant and tying in with that
Absolutely,
grant.
right.
So,
And that put us in the position to receive future grants.
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? No? Okay.
And the only other thing I would say is the request be put on the next agenda for, the 23rd, I believe it is.
Yep.
For authorizing.
For approval, yes, no problem. It shall be there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Mr. Artis.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have Hudson Valley Engineering to give us a discussion about the Carroll Drive Bridge replacement. How are you, gentlemen? Good. Good. See you. So if people don't know, Carroll Drive Bridge off of Beekman Road has been slated for replacement. We have received a grant from Dutchess County, New York State. Our Dutchess County Department of Traffic and, what is it called there, that department, they're very involved. Who was that, Scott?
Public Works?
No, not Public Works. It was, not Bob Balkind, it was the other one. Planning, yeah. Planning sets through the TIP, right? The
Right.
Traffic Improvement
Right.
Projects.
They
Federal
administer
Highway
it. They administer it.
They administered the grant, so we have received that. We have a 80-20 match, right? We have to match
Correct, yes.
20%. And actually, we are going to apply for a submittal for 15 of that 20% that we have to, that we're responsible for. So in the end, the town may only be responsible for 5% of the project cost, which is wonderful. So we are going to give an overview of the replacement.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having us tonight. Thank you, community, for showing up. This is a great turnout for this project. As Supervisor mentioned, we are here to talk about the Carroll Drive Bridge replacement over the Fishkill Creek. So I'm Jack Orton. I'm with HVEA Engineers. I'll be the project manager for this project. I'm here tonight with Andrew Mason. He's the lead structural engineer. He's the smart one, so any technical questions, definitely direct to him.
Did Brendan not want to come hang out with us?
He's
Not
busy
tonight.
tonight, so he'll be around if you need him, though. So here's just a brief agenda for tonight. I'm going to have a real short technical discussion, go over some of our objectives, the impacts, and the funding, and then wrap up with the schedule and timeline. So tonight, this is a public informational meeting. It's not a formal public hearing. We're really here tonight for you guys, for the community, for the board. You guys drive this road every single day. I'm sure the neighborhood and the community knows a lot more about the concerns that are out there than we do, that we can just observe in our field visits. So we're here to get a better sense of what's really going on out there and also satisfy or address concerns of the public. We will answer questions tonight and we can have discussions, but please, if you want anything to really be part of the public record, we do request that you submit questions, comments in writing. There are comment forms on that table over there. There's also a sign-in sheet. Please sign in so that we have your contact information if we do need to reach out to you for further information. So this project will replace the Carroll Drive Bridge over the Fishkill Creek. Carroll Drive is a local neighborhood road just east of the hamlet of Hopewell Junction. This next slide just shows a zoomed-in view. You can see the Fishkill Creek actually meanders around the entire neighborhood. The bridge is very unique in that it provides the sole access in and out of this neighborhood. So more than 50 homes rely on this bridge every single day for access. Maintaining access to those homes throughout the duration of construction is critical, and that's something that we're taking a really heavy look at right now. So our objectives are to replace this existing bridge. The existing bridge is what we call a 3-span timber bridge. It's actually made all of wood, and while it's not very old, it is in a pretty bad state right now. It continues to deteriorate, and it's at the point in its life that it does need to be replaced. You can see in that top picture, there are piers in the water. There are actually 2 sets of piers. That's what makes it a 3-span bridge. Those piers do impede water. They're located in the perfect spot for debris to come down the creek, get clogged, get stuck, which jeopardizes the structural integrity of the bridge and also could lead to increase in hydraulic concerns. So the proposed project will span the Fishkill Creek with a single span, sort of like the structure shown on the bottom there. We're going to eliminate those piers, open up the hydraulic opening to help alleviate some of the flooding concerns in the area, and provide a more durable bridge. So this slide just shows just a plan view of the bridge. The top shows the cross-section if you're looking down the roadway. So right now, the existing bridge is 24 feet wide. It has 2 12-foot travel lanes. That's adequate space for vehicles, two-way flow. However, it is pretty tight when you put a pedestrian on there. And we've heard from some of the neighbors that they do indeed feel constricted if they're walking on the bridge and a car comes. So the proposed bridge will be 28 feet wide, which will provide a 3 to 4 foot shoulder for pedestrians, a little bit more breathing space. Hopefully it makes people feel a little more comfortable walking down the road. On the bottom is an elevation view of the bridge, the proposed bridge. So we have the proposed bridge overlaid on the existing, and you can see in there are those piers. We're going to remove the piers. We're actually going to increase the length of the bridge slightly to provide more area for water to flow. And again, this is all to help alleviate some of the flooding concerns in the area. So right now, we have not chosen the exact bridge type. This is something that we're interested to hear feedback from the community, especially the neighbors in the area, as they have to drive over this bridge every single day. What we do know is it's going to be a single span structure, something like this. This is what we call a steel girder bridge, where the beams are actually made of steel, and there's a concrete roadway deck and railing. This is a very viable alternative, and all the alternatives I'm going to show you have pros and cons. This is a durable bridge. They're very common. The next option is a concrete beam instead of a steel beam. Again, this is durable. It's economical. There's low maintenance on these, but they look very rudimentary. It's a very ordinary bridge. One that we wanted to show the community and the public was a truss, something like this. This bridge offers a different aesthetic value, and we were wondering if the neighbors thought this was aesthetically pleasing and something they were interested in, or if they were simply looking for just your standard basic bridge type. The downside to a truss, something like this, is that it requires more long-term maintenance. So although it costs the same initially to construct, the town needs to consider the long-term implications going 15, 20 years out down the road. There are more inspection needs. There may be a need to paint the bridge. So that's something to take into consideration. So as I've said a few times now, we need to maintain access to the neighbors at all times during construction. And that's probably the most challenging part of this entire project. In order to do so, the town engineer asked us to look at several different alternatives to build this bridge while maintaining that access. We looked at cutting the existing bridge in half and building half at a time. We looked at building a new bridge over the existing. We looked at putting the new proposed bridge offline next to the existing bridge. But after all that, it turned out that the most feasible, quickest, and economical way to do this while maintaining access is to actually construct a temporary bridge adjacent to the existing bridge, shift all of the traffic over, and then remove the existing bridge, replace it in the same spot, and then take the temporary bridge down. So that does infringe on private property, so taking that into consideration, we are proposing a single-lane temporary bridge to minimize that impact. So there'll be alternating one-way flow controlled by traffic signals at either end. And we do recognize that is an inconvenience to the neighbors, but again, I think it's the quickest and most economical way to get this project done and get out of the neighborhood and have a new bridge open to the public. Construction is anticipated to take 8 to 12 months. We want to do this in one construction season. So that would mean starting in the spring and being complete before winter. We don't want to winter over, especially with a temporary bridge in the area. Right now, we're striving to get out there next spring of 2020, and be complete by the end of 2020. That's going to hinge largely on DOT review process and property acquisitions, which I'll get into in a minute. So this shows the alignment of the temporary bridge, not the permanent. So as you can see, we're proposing to install a single-lane temporary bridge to the west of the existing bridge. This would enable us to shift the traffic over. The contractor would have the existing bridge area as wide open for their work zone. They'd replace that bridge in kind, remove all the temporary work, and put traffic back on the permanent alignment. So this project will require property acquisition, both for construction and long-term needs. As you mentioned earlier, Supervisor mentioned earlier, the town got a federal grant for this. The federal grant process has a lot of strings. There's a very, very stringent right-of-way acquisition process that we must follow. They really value property owners' rights, as they should, and that's something that the DOT and the federal government will be looking out for to make sure that we follow the process and the property owners are well aware of their rights and receive fair compensation for their property. So the impacted property owners will be involved throughout the entire process. We've already reached out to all 4 impacted corners. We actually met with 2 of them earlier this week and had a great conversation. We'll continue that conversation. We're going to go out on site, help them visualize things, and again, the discussions don't end here with them. They will be in contact with us the entire time. The process does require 2 appraisals. There will be a full appraisal, and then an independent party will review those appraisals to ensure that the town is making an adequate offer to the property owners at fair market value. The town will make a fair market offer to the property owners. They can negotiate, and there will be a formal closing on the property. So this graphic shows the acquisitions that are required. The majority of these acquisitions are what we call a temporary easement. The town's essentially renting property from the homeowners for the duration of construction. So that, again, is necessary to build this temporary bridge offline. At the end of the day, the temporary bridge will be removed, the land will be restored to the condition it's in today or a better condition, and the property will be handed back over to the homeowner. There are 4 permanent acquisitions, 1 in each corner. These are minor, small strip takings. These are necessary for future access and maintenance needs for the town. DOT will be making sure that you guys have adequate access to and underneath the bridge for any future maintenance, replacement, any work that needs to be done. So the town is very fortunate to have received a federal grant to replace this. As Supervisor mentioned, the federal government will pay up to 80% of the cost, and the town's looking to get an additional 15% coverage, which leaves 5% on the town's burden, which is fantastic. It's a great deal for a bridge replacement. The money is actually coming from Federal Highway Administration, and FHWA relies on the local New York State DOT department to oversee this grant and the process. So we'll be dealing with DOT in Poughkeepsie. They're going to oversee this project through the entire process. They have a very stringent review process. We have to follow a whole set of steps to make sure that everybody's playing by the rules and following the process. So with that said, this is a pretty simplified schedule that has all of the different reviews and approvals that are necessary. So this schedule takes us out to construction in spring of 2020. And again, this is largely dependent on how the right-of-way acquisition process goes. That can be burdensome. It can go smoothly, or it could drag on for quite some time. So our goal is to get out there next year. I think it's doable, and we're working hard to make that happen so that we can have a bridge, a nice, safe bridge by the end of 2020. So thank you again for having us. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, if I could
Scott,
just-
any questions?
Yeah, just one thing on the three types of design that were presented. The third one was a truss type, the external truss type.
Yep.
And we included it in the presentation just so, in case people wondered, why wasn't it included? Because you may drive down and see those bridges elsewhere. The one thing I want to point out too is, at some point, all these structures have a useful life. Whether it be, 50, 75 years, there's a useful life and it'll have to be replaced. If it's steel or concrete beam, it won't be us, but in the future, that bridge could be then cut in half. A single lane of traffic could be maintained on half of it. There'll be enough width, and it could be replaced one half at a time. If we go with that truss bridge, somebody down the road won't have that option, and it'll be back to that temporary structure, which does add cost to the project. So that's something we should be mindful of.
AJ might be around in 75 years.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Might be done college by then.
No.
Well, the truss bridge is pretty, so have you weighed out with any of the public, the residents there on,
We have not yet. Tonight's the first time we've presented that.
who in the audience here is from Carroll Drive area? Everybody here? Okay. So there's comment cards over here if you have questions or comments, but that's something good to point out, what you like to see. So please indicate what you like.
Did you ask him a technical question so he didn't come up for nothing?
I'm assuming you guys are gonna have like a point person for the public to,
Be the weight
while
limit.
construction is going on.
Yes, during construction, we'll have full-time construction inspection. There'll be a whole team, probably 2 people out there at all times. We'll have a point person that residents can come to with questions, concerns, comments. During the design phase, please contact me with any questions. My information is on that handout by the door. You can email me, call me anytime, and we'll make sure to get back to you.
And of course, the Town of East Fishkill Engineering Department will be overseeing the whole project as well.
We've had the bridge replaced on Palin Road. I remember there was a temporary structure there at some point in time, and some of the fire apparatus were not able to drive over it. It exceeded the weight limit. So since this is the only access in and out of this development, I'm assuming the temporary bridge will be able to hold all fire apparatus to the weight limits. Perfect.
There you go, Peter.
There it
You
is,
answered
Pete.
the question.
And I'll just throw one more out there. The soil borings, are we going to rock, or these are going to be friction piles?
We are going to rock.
To rock.
Rock is encountered about 25 feet.
At about 25 feet. So I just will give the neighbors a heads up that during that pile driving operation, you will hear some pounding out there.
We'd actually probably lean towards drilling.
You may go with micro
so we
piles?
don't- Yeah,
Okay.
micro piles or drilled shafts, so you don't have that.
So you won't have the
hammering
pounding?
of
Okay.
driven
I'm sure the
piles.
residents will appreciate that. Okay.
Yes.
Will there be other meetings that we can make comments that, as we go forward with these projects?
You'll have a public hearing.
this project?
After final design, when would we?
What's the normal process, Jack?
So that's largely dependent on how the project goes and how the town board feels. This is the only required meeting, or if there are concerns or a need for additional meetings, we're certainly willing to come out. Usually we just kind of see how it goes and play that by ear.
Yeah, so maybe once the final choice of bridges chosen, maybe the town can have another information session. That's what we could do. We could have it at the community center or here at Town Hall, and we could get, we could send a letter out to all the homeowners to let them know.
That'd be great.
Okay? Yeah.
No.
Jack, could you explain the length of the bridge compared to what it is? And I think you mentioned it's being raised 2 feet, but
Sure.
some people in our area don't know how long.
Okay, so the bridge now is roughly 65 feet long, abutment to abutment. The proposed bridge we're looking at is 75 feet, so it's additional 10 feet longer, 5 feet on each side. What that does is it enables us to build the new abutments or the walls that hold the bridge up behind the existing, which keep us out of the water, which will minimize impact to the stream, help us obtain our permits a little more readily. As far as the height, what we're doing is we're actually going to keep what we call the low chord. It's the bottom of the bridge. We're going to keep that height the same as now, or is it slightly higher?
Maybe 6 inches high.
So slightly higher than the existing, but because of that longer span, where we're getting rid of those piers that are in the water, the bridge section is going to be thicker. It's going to be a deeper section. So the road will be raised approximately 2 feet from the condition today.
Okay.
Be too uncomfortable to prepare an architectural rendering of what this is going to look like?
No, we can certainly do that.
So what we could do is, once the bridge is chosen, we'll send out a drawing of it and let you know when the next meeting is. Sounds good? Yes, ma'am?
What will the weight limit be for the bridge?
I can be able to walk across it, so.
Anybody else in here?
We could save money.
So since we're using federal funds for this, they do require that we construct this bridge to handle all legal highway loads. The current weight limit is what they call HL 93. It'll accommodate anything that's on the road other than an oversized permit-only vehicle.
80,000 pounds.
Is that roughly?
80,000 pounds is the legal limit without an article.
Well, it accommodates a truck loading that's 20 tons, 40,000 pounds. It's a combination of loadings.
Axle loadings.
Axle, right, the
Factors in.
total 20 tons is spread out between 2 or 3 axles.
You have a lot, this is an older neighborhood, there's still people doing stuff like putting blacktop driveways in, pools in, things like that. Leading to her question, I'm a CDL, I know trucks. A triaxle, that's gotta be able to take that load.
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned before you took a seat that you want questions in writing, and they get submitted to who?
Oh, okay. So on those comment forms, there's my email.
There's a form over on the table with all that information.
Yes.
You could email us that form. You could put that form, you can hand us that form at the end if you're ready, or you can just email me a question, myself or Scott Bryant.
Or if you don't have email, you could drop it to
works
the
too,
town
yep.
hall, and I'll make sure that they get the questions. If you don't have email, somebody, just drop it to me, and I'll make sure that the engineers get it.
And
During the temporary bridge period, what's the weight, are there gonna be weight restrictions on that? You gotta be able to take a triaxle across it.
That will be in discussion
I'm
with
looking at maybe blacktop my driveway next year, to be honest. If I got, it's a 400-foot long driveway.
It has to
that's to
accommodate the fire
that's to
truck.
accommodate emergency vehicles. As far as the weight limit, we'd be in contact with the manufacturer of the actual temporary.
It's just things that, as, we need to know.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be,
I'm not gonna drive over
it could be a posted weight, same as it is today, because right now I think it's posted at 22 tons.
22 tons.
And the heavier you make the temporary structure, obviously, the more it's going to add cost, okay? Temporary abutments, temporary structure itself. So I think that's something that we'll be evaluating as time goes on.
It's just information that.
Yes.
Maybe I'll put
Yeah.
a blacktop in a driveway.
Right, and we'll make that all public, yes, absolutely. It's a good question, it's an excellent question.
And not only will we send you the information, but I'll make sure that all the information is posted on our website, so you can get it anytime you'd like. Any other board members, any questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys very much, appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, well, that comes to open discussion. Any board members have any comments
Thanks, Jack. Thank you.
to make tonight?
Just one thing, just because it's gonna happen before our next meeting, beginning the week of May 18th, it's EMS week, so I'd just like
Yes,
to take a
thank you.
moment to thank our volunteer EMS in our town. They do a lot for us, they don't get paid, and they're always there when we need them, so thank you so much for their service.
Thank you. You got a hold of Claire, thank you very much. Anybody else? Any comments? Any concerns? No? Okay. Well, that's it for our work session. Our next town board meeting is May 23rd, 2019. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.